you're having trouble with the door downstairs, from what I understand. If you are aware that there are any other council members that are coming to the meeting, since it's after 5:30, we'll have to have Diane go down and get the door open if that's the case. Thank you all for coming. We do want to talk about two different issues this evening. One of which is going to be our Airbnb or short-term rental ordinance. And second is going to be our sidewalk ordinance, of which everyone is aware that we passed last week the ordinance that would ban the permanent structures going into our new streetscape until we've had sufficient time to review exactly what we'd like to allow in a more permanent ordinance going forward. Jason from our engineer's office has asked if he could preface these conversations with an update on the streetscape. Jason, would you like to go ahead?
Up there?
Yes, please.
Yeah, this is regarding sidewalk obstructions, more specifically fencing. I know that there was a plan that went around when we first started streetscape about how deep the patio could be based on where you were located. And I was out there today marking with chalk on the sidewalk how far out the fences could go in front of each building. And this is based on EBA requirements, clearance for wheelchairs that have to have a minimum clear distance. And with light poles and the flower beds and the large bump outs and the small sidewalk, it just varies. It's not, I can't give you any address with a requirement. You know, saying if you're at this business, you have a 10-foot patio. If you're at this business, you have a 7-foot. It's just so complicated out there. I recommend that any business that wants to do fencing on the new sidewalk in the streetscape, clear it with engineering or administration first, because we can go out there and mark exactly, here's how far you can go, no further. You can make it nice and uniform and come back a little bit. Because some shapes are awkward. They'll come out 10 feet and then come into 7 feet where the bump out where the parking starts, and you just gotta have room for EDA. If it was as simple as saying this building gets 10 foot, this building gets 7 foot, I would create that list for you. But that's just not the case out there. So some buildings do just have uniform, but a lot of them have a very irregular shape of maximum size they can do. So I would just suggestion, at least in the downtown streetscape area, that they clear it with engineering the building department first. That was my comment.
Okay, I do have a question for you while you're up there. On the bump outs, there seems to be, of course, the additional footage that would allow for additional patio areas there. Would there be anything that would preclude us from having more common areas rather than having the fencing in front of a building be specifically for that specific business? If we had a common space, maybe a common patio and one or more of those bump outs, would there be anything in your opinion that would prevent us from doing that?
No, the only thing that would prevent you is clearance with wheelchairs with the ADA requirement. That's the only thing. As long as we have 5 foot from any kind of obstruction, you can do with it on your lease.
Clarification, when you speak about that clearance, ADA requirements for clearance, are we talking clearance for the sidewalk, for the wheelchair? Where is that clearance? Is it up against the building or is it on the street side?
It doesn't, as long as there's 5 foot. Now we don't want to keep alternating it back and forth, so the wheelchair has to do this. But what I did was I measured it from the front of curb, back of curb. If there's no back of curb, I measured 5 foot to line. So that's the biggest you can do. But now there's areas where there's a planter box. So I went to the corner of that planter box and kind of drew a 5 foot radius. So you're actually here, but then you can kind of radius it if you want to, and then you're closer. It's not a jut. Because you can actually violate that 5 foot if you went 90 degrees. That makes it. But to answer your question, it doesn't matter where the clearance is as long as there's a continuous path, but obviously we don't want to.
Well, and that's my concern.
Right.
You know, we don't want patrons to come in off the streets to the sidewalk and then just start weaving in and out. That would be, I think that would be bad practice. You know, to set it that way.
Also, even just looking at it aesthetically, where, you know, we were concerned about having varying types of fencing, varying heights, varying materials, varying colors, and the idea was to be somewhat uniform. But if you're telling us that from some businesses you may be out 10 feet and some businesses you may be out 8 feet.
It varies anywhere from 6 to 11 and a half, 12 feet.
6 to 11 and a half
Yeah,
feet.
and it all depends on where you are. And some and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know some will have just 6 foot. They're not, their frontage is small enough. Some will have both, where it can come out and be almost L-shaped, but we've got to make sure we don't jog like that, because then we're violating, you know, as people turn, we're violating that 5 foot clear path. So it's just unique, it's just unique where I think every applicant, before they put it up, just kind of make sure it's clear with us.
Paul, you have some comments?
Yes, comments, more questions.
Microphone,
Definitely, I think no one should put anything up without the engineering office approving it. Period. Anywhere, and that went on before. It's something, and I don't know exactly where it was, I didn't bring my paperwork tonight, but the last safety service director had a guideline of like being 6 feet from the curb back area open. I know that's somewhere I can dig it up, I'll look for it, but from the curb, it was 6 feet open for people to walk around. Okay, like you said, I already looked at 2 of the businesses, maybe even 3 of them that had places before, and there's these flower bed things in front of them that are a couple of feet wide. Well, that's going to restrict those areas considerably, so I think we really need to look at those and see how that could or should be handled.
Can I ask, in the past, has a permit been required before fencing has been?
Do you understand, Mayor? Jim.
If I may, if you look at even your old draft of this new ordinance from last year, we have in there that the building department wanted to require permits for any of this fencing at any time. The simple fix to that would be to leave that in there and then just add in, it must also be signed off by engineering for ADA compliance at that point. Since we don't have a 6 foot rule or a 5 foot rule standard, if you require the permit and require 2 approvals on the permit from building and from engineering, you'd be covered.
Didn't that amended, or, Jim, didn't that amendment indicate 36 to 48 inches? So we weren't up under 5 or 6 feet, it was 36 or 48.
Right, on a height requirement, it did have a maximum height in there as far as that goes too. So there wasn't going to be any 6 foot fencing down there per se.
I think initially it had 6 foot in there, but we had, in the amendment, requested it to have a maximum of 48, is that correct?
Right, and your historical commission also had heavy input into that draft that you had last year.
Yes.
And if we change much more than ADA or anything like that, it will have to go back to them also.
There were also color requirements as far as gray, brown, or black in that amended ordinance, was that correct?
I don't have it with me, I'd have to
Oh,
pull it and, or try to find it and look at it,
I
yes.
think that was proposed by the historical.
mhm.
Right,
I
right,
think it was as well.
yeah.
Before we brought it to you,
Before we brought it to you folks, we ran it through the historical commission also and had your input into it so that it was ready to go as far as, at that time, legality and or building wise, code wise, and historical wise. It was ready to go at that time, but the streetscape has changed that dramatically.
Yes, I recall as part of that commission that there were even samples of the fences that they wanted to have be used versus having just the color, but it was actually the typing, the type of fencing as well as the ornate characteristics of it and so forth. So I don't know that we want to go into into that detail, but I do recall as part of that historical preservation conversation that that was one of the requests.
Again, they had to approve the draft ordinance submitted to you people.
Okay.
They were comfortable that they could stay in line with everything.
Serena, do you have any comments?
Yes, I do. My personal preference, and of course it's private account, but I think that they should stay uniform, like vendors and Cosmos. I believe one of them down there wanted to become eclectic, and I just don't think that's, I think it needs to be uniform. Whatever we decide, it needs to be uniform.
And those fences were very simple. They didn't have, even the ones that,
I'm not even sure I would describe it as simple.
oh, not the eclectic one, I'm talking about the uniform ones.
Yes.
At vendors, at Cosmos. Because even the ones that the Historical Preservation Commission was looking at, they were even a little bit more ornate. But they were still, they fell within that draft ordinance where they were the appropriate color, the appropriate height. But then they could choose whether it, had a curlicue in it or whether it was a straight fence structure.
That's just my personal preference.
Yes, Paul?
Yes. Some of those who were down there, Cosmos was a pretty strong fence. Some of the other ones were not. My concern is the safety, and that it's only a natural thing that people are going to lean against them. And some of those will not handle a person leaning against them. I don't know if there's a way to regulate the strength of the fences.
That was why Frank wanted permits. They would tell us how they intended on securing them. They would be inspected upon completion and, if you would, tested for safety. Okay, I mean, if you go down there and you shake it, and it moves, you got a problem.
Exactly.
Okay,
And that's
if we go down there and we lean against it, it doesn't move, we're not going to put, currently, an ordinance for like front porch railings calls for 400 pounds. Well, I'm not 400 pounds, but if I give it what we used to call it, the state to JJ test, and it survives, then it's going to be approved. Something that's obviously unsafe, we're not going to approve.
Yeah, I've seen in other towns that I looked at, some of them were made out of heavier railings, lack of whatever the word is, but they were much heavier. And I know by leaning on it myself, some we had are not strong enough.
Agreed.
Jim, will you confirm that as part of the amended temporary ordinance that we had, that there were no structures, even temporary, permitted from December 1st through, I believe it was March 31st?
That is correct.
To March-
That's the way I read it when it was it was given to me
Okay.
late last week, so,
Okay.
okay.
Does anyone have any other comments? I guess what I'd like to suggest at this point is that maybe we pull back out that old amended draft, we'll call it, that was already sent through the Historical Preservation Commission. We can all review it in more detail, make sure it's something that you're comfortable with, adding that due to the fact that we have varying measurements now out from the buildings with the new streetscape, that within that initial streetscape section that we require a permit and 2 approvals. Would anyone have any objection to that?
No, it shouldn't be closed.
Okay.
There's one other thing that's come up too. We talk about, we're looking at these at the front of the buildings, off the front. There are people who've been talking about and using the alleys. The alleys are right of ways. There shouldn't be anything in those alleys unless we do something with that ordinance. And I mean nothing. And it has been.
I'll also mention that there is a patio that is on the back of Chit Chat, and whether that would need to fall under this ordinance, I would assume that it would not.
No, it's on private property.
That's on private property,
Oh,
okay? So, you know, now if they want to put a fence around the patio, or they have, I'm unaware of that, but, I mean, I walked through there a number of months ago, and the patio was fine, but that is private property back there.
All right, so it would not fall under that. So are you saying that any of those buildings, or I guess I would say on the other side even, that anything that would be out the back side of the building would not fall under this ordinance, only on the sidewalk
You can't say
itself?
I can't say that until I look at property lines on the other site, and that would go to our plan submission. Somebody submits a plan, then we would go from there.
But Linda, if they're planning on putting a fence up, they would be going through that same process, correct? And getting two approvals, and the fencing has to meet the requirements.
If the fence is on private property, it would only require a building department approval, not the engineering.
So that does make a difference. Paul?
You brought up about chit chat with patio back there, yes. We have a lot of little buildings with that potential.
Mhm.
Sugar Bowl has a very large area out back that could be used like that. But we're not talking about the same thing like the sidewalks in front of the buildings where the people are walking. They're not going to be walking in those areas. Those could be, however they want to develop them, if the building department approved it.
As long as they're on
We
private
wouldn't
property,
need to be messing with that.
it would only be building department.
It'd be just like putting a fence up on your own private property, you have to go through gateway permits, but it'd be like just putting it on the back of your house. Because if it's private property, we're not regulating it like we would the sidewalks.
And Linda, excuse me, I do have a copy of the amended Exhibit A, if you want me to make a copy of it for
Yes, that would
everybody.
be, that would be
This
great.
is the one that says that the area of the sidewalk to be used by the business shall be fenced at a minimum height of 36 inches tall. Fence shall be pre-manufactured, decorated metal, black, brown, dark brown, or dark gray. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
You didn't read the 48 inches, so that is not part of that.
No, it's deleted, it's worded out.
Okay,
Right.
but I think that's something we're going to want to add back in.
Okay. But I just want to let you know I did have a copy.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask why? We want to add that back in?
I don't think we want 6-foot fences
Oh,
on.
she said 48 inches.
No, it was taken out. So there's a minimum of 36, but no maximum. So if we don't put a maximum of 48 inches back in there, we're going to have 6-foot fences, or potentially could have 6-foot fences on streetscape, and I don't think that we necessarily want that.
Okay, thank you.
And this also states that if they have a liquor permit, they must get a permit from the Ohio Department of Liquor Control.
Yeah, to be able to serve liquor on there. Okay, so if we could pull that back out, I don't know if you need to make any edits to that, or if Jimmy can just add the, are you shaking your head, yes?
Yeah.
Jim, would you mind adding the 48 inches back in there?
Diane, if you would email, scan that, email it to me, and then I can have it transferred back into Word and edit it and take care of it.
And I think we need to make sure that we have the process that is going to require the engineering and building department approval as well. Any further comments? Okay. Then we'll just wait till that newly amended ordinance comes back, and then we'll take a look at it again, see if we've got some time now that, according to our past ordinance, they aren't permitted to have any obstruction of that area between December 1st, which of course is just in a few weeks, and it was either March 31st or March 1st, I can't remember, March 1st. Okay. All right, so we can actually move on, if you'd like, to the Airbnb discussion. In our last meeting, I know it's been a few weeks, but we had Mike Porta from the fire department here, as well as Jim Johnson, again, describing some of the issues that they're concerned about with the Airbnbs in the city. I think that as we briefly discussed before, even after hearing from both of them, as well as Andrea, I think you spoke as well, was to get a sentiment from council as to whether if this is something that we want to move forward on, and even with additional regulations, additional discussion, we can craft something that is a little more restrictive on the Airbnbs, or if council's sentiment is that we don't want them in the city, then we don't necessarily need to waste time going forward. So I don't know if maybe we can just get an idea of sentiment. I will share my own sentiment in regards to the Airbnbs. I do think that we should allow them in the city. However, I think that there has to be a benefit to the city for allowing them, and that would be the suggestion of some type of bed tax. And that's something that we certainly would need to discuss with the law director on how we would go about doing that. But certainly with other types of accommodations, there is a bed tax. And perhaps that would be something that would be bringing in additional revenue to the city, whether it's a lot or a little bit, at least it would be something that would give the city a reason for allowing them. Second, I think they truly have to be heavily regulated, just to make sure that we have a process to register them so that we are aware, not just by accident, whether we have this type of a accommodation in our city or not. It has to be something that, and if they are not registered, then there is some type of penalty for them not registering them. So I don't know if you want to go around the room and at least get an idea of where we are with the Airbnb idea. Now, we can certainly put a lot of additional detail into this conversation going forward, but I'm just trying to get a feel for, is this what we want to spend some time crafting? It's certainly something that's becoming much more popular, not only in our own city, but in cities that surround us. And I realize that there's significant concern from the fire department as well as from the building department. But if we satisfy those concerns, is it something that we want to look at going forward? Paul, would you like to make some comments?
Yeah.
Okay. Megan?
I'll make a comment. I think, I don't have an issue with Airbnbs in the city. I think that, yes, we should have some regulations in place that we're lacking at this point. Something probably along the lines closer to how we have to register our rentals. And there's a fee every year for rental properties that we register. I mean, if the Airbnb is basically close to the same thing. We're short-term rental at this point. A bed tax, I'm not really sure how that would work, or if that would be a little too difficult to keep track of. But if we do like a yearly fee for rentals like we do now, I think that would be appropriate. I don't particularly want to stifle tourism in our city and keep people out. I don't think that's a good idea. I think Airbnb is becoming much more popular, especially with younger crowds, and I think that's something that's appealing to the younger people. So I want to definitely support it within our city, but I see the need for regulation, especially for the fire department and others of that.
The registration fee would be paid by the owner, the bed tax would be paid by the renter.
I understand that. I think it would just be difficult to keep track of in how the logistics of that work within our city. I think that
Well, I
would
don't
be
know
something.
that either, but that
Exactly.
would be something that we research.
Yeah, I don't know how, if our tax department would be doing that, or who would be in charge of collecting that rent and how that would work. I have no idea.
The management company is required to send it to the city, so it would be accounting once it got here, so we wouldn't be necessarily collecting it. It would be collected by the management company or the owner, and then they are required to forward that to the city. So the city's part of that would be accounting for it, basically.
And would we have to keep track of how often it's rented? That's my question. I don't know how we would do that.
I don't know if
coming up here, Linda. Have you had an opportunity to check with other cities on how they've been developing this? What their procedures are? Because I definitely believe there should be registration. We definitely have to take into consideration the safety of the people that are going to the B&Bs, and as well as make sure that the people that are renting them are covered for safety issues as well.
I think Mike shared with us last time we spoke, and I know again, it's been a couple weeks ago, that Canton is in the process of trying to determine how they want to regulate these going forward. They do know that they have them in their city as well, and I believe they've put a moratorium on those that are already in place currently, so they are not changing them right now, but they will be, if they change the ordinance going forward, or if they choose not to go forward with them at all, then they would have to basically shut them down. But I don't know, we may want to have Mike come back up and have comments in regards to that issue. I'm sorry. Go ahead. About the bed tax, is it something that you're familiar with, or what our process might be?
That's where I think we would have to do a little bit more research. The young lady in the back, my understanding, does have an Airbnb, so she may be able to give a little bit more insight as far as the rules and regulations with regard to Airbnb and what fees are assessed or not assessed, or, if that's a possibility. I do believe that other municipalities may use bed tax for these type of short-term rentals. With regard to us, we have one hotel in our city in Hampton Inn, and they obviously are responsible for submitting the bed tax that is due to us in the county. Again, like Megan said, that's an established hotel that, consistently, and hopefully consistently, is renting out rooms on a daily basis. So just for tracking purposes, the short-term rentals may present a little bit of more of a challenge with regard to making sure that they are accurately reporting and paying that tax, if that is the avenue. So that I think it would just take a little bit more research to find out the ins and the outs for those different short-term rentals.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to have some comments?
Yeah.
You want me to come up here?
Okay.
Turn this on.
Hello. As far as a bed tax goes, I believe there are other cities where Airbnb specifically, I'm not sure about, we are
Would you state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry, Allison Worsler.
And where is your Airbnb?
It's on 17 Southwest. Where Airbnb collects them directly and sends them right to the city. Like, I don't think that's money that the host even sees. It comes right from the guest to Airbnb paid in. But that would require more research, because I don't know how that works, but I've heard it happens in other places.
That's a vibe.
Um,
So can you tell us a little bit about your Airbnb and why you have chosen to list your home as an Airbnb?
We bought the house next to us, and my husband always wanted to be a landlord and have multiple properties, so that was one thing he was looking at. And as we were rehabbing it, I said, why don't we try this? And we had our attorney look into all the laws in Massillon, and we really found there wasn't anything that fit this specifically. So we went ahead, and I've been trying to keep an eye on what's going on, so I can maybe put some input if it's helpful. And we really can ourselves make a lot more money doing it as an Airbnb than we can as a traditional rental. And since we live right next door, I'm a stay-at-home mom, so I'm able to run this business with my kids in tow if needed. And I love sharing our city with people. We have a board in our house that says, like, our favorite restaurants in Lynn China or Cosmos or whatever, so, and we have an accountant that does all of our taxes, so we're paying all the proper, what we earn and how all that kind of stuff. So, I think they definitely do benefit our city now, even though we're not getting a specific payout, maybe the way other cities are. Does anyone
Can I
question?
ask if you actually state your house rules whether
Yes.
that's on the Airbnb site?
Yes.
And second question would be, where do you advertise? On Airbnb only or other advertising
It's-
sites as well?
It's mostly just Airbnb. We also list on VRBO. And sometimes, like last weekend when there was a playoff game, I threw out there on Facebook, hey, if anybody's coming to town, like our house happened to be vacant last weekend and it was the first empty weekend we've had since the spring. So that's pretty much the only way that we advertise. We are familiar, my husband and I were foster parents for several years, so we've had fire marshal, did you come to my house? Okay.
I thought you looked familiar.
So we're familiar with the idea of smoke detectors and CO detectors and, egress and, all the things that make a house safe. So we feel like we've gone above and beyond to make sure that our guests are safe in that way. So if there's potential legislation or, rules coming down to make sure that there are smoke detectors in every bedroom and on every floor, that there's a real fire extinguisher, not the little spray things, or that there's not overcrowding in the home, not 20 people jammed into a little house. That all feels reasonable to me. So I understand the desire to keep people safe. And I feel like we've already done all of that. I don't know that there's much more that we would do because, like I said, being foster parents, we went through all of that in our personal home, so we just were able to translate it over to our Airbnb home.
Do you have an evacuation plan posted in the home?
I think so, yeah. And I bought those little plastic acrylic things like businesses have to several. I'll make sure that that's there. It's not.
Well, we haven't really
Yeah.
required anything.
That is
as
one of the
yet,
things we had
so-
to have for our foster care, but we haven't been foster parents in about 3 years, so. But yeah, I have it for every.
So do you allow more than 2 people per bedroom?
No,
Do you state that regulation in your house rules?
no,
Do you have posted house rules?
yes.
I don't need to.
No, it's okay.
I'm just
I know there's
curious
really
as
no rules right now, so there isn't anything to
Well,
break.
no, I mean your rules, not
Oh,
our
yeah,
rules,
yeah.
your rules.
Yeah,
As
no,
far as
our,
what you permit and what you don't permit.
our limit is 10 for the house. We have 4 bedrooms and 2 couches in the living room. And sometimes people will come with toddlers or babies, and those don't really count in those numbers. So
Do you permit couch surfing?
if people come with 10 folks, that means 2 are on couches.
What if they, I guess I view couch surfing as they are renting just the couch, not the rooms.
No, we started out potentially renting our house out by the room, but we found out that nobody rented it that way. So I actually deactivated those listings, and I only have one for the whole house, because that's the only one that people wanted. So, and I think it's difficult to make sure that everybody has a pleasant experience if I'm not there in the house, making sure that the kitchen stays clean or any common bathrooms stay clean. So I much prefer that way. Even though Airbnb would let me list it anyway, I closed down those other listings. I just have the one for the whole house.
And you don't provide any meals?
No.
There's a kitchen in the home that they prepare their own?
Yes. Yeah, because that was one of the things we talked about, is another layer of regulation if we opted to provide food. And we don't do that.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your comments.
Yeah, I'm happy to help.
Mike, do you want to come up to the mic for a second? Just wanted you to reiterate a bit as to, since it's been a couple of weeks since our last meeting, what your concerns are from a fire and safety perspective.
Originally, and it's kind of funny because she was the one that started all of this with me. She was the foster care, if I told you the story about the foster care, she was the one that called me about the foster care inspection. And then we got to talking about Airbnb, so I'm very familiar with her situation over there. And I know that it's a nice family and they're safe over there. Safety, the inspection aspect, I guess. You have, layers of rental fees, registrations for the various things within the city already listed in ordinance. I brought this up too because I think you might already have something similar to the tax that you're looking for on the books. And I brought
The
this
bed
up.
tax?
Yeah, I had this as part of, all the research I've done in this, but under 195.01 intent, and it might have to be modified a little bit to fit this situation, but you wouldn't have to start with 0 on it. Intent of this chapter to levy an excise tax of 3% on transactions by which lodging by a hotel is or is to be furnished to transient guests as authorized and permitted by Ohio Revised Code. Accordingly, this chapter shall be construed purpose to consistent with any requirement of law. It's really just 2 sentences. Might be a place to start though. It looks like that's probably what happens at the Hampton. They probably are paying a 3% excise tax to the city. So, might be a place to start to look for that. Again, the concerns were safety concerns. I think we're looking for building and fire safety inspections on all the Airbnbs, period. And again, I want to differentiate between short-term property rentals. Airbnb is a company, it's like Kleenex and tissue. So we're really looking at short-term property rentals, not just Airbnbs, VRBOs. I think the law director reiterated that at the last time. But I do want to, because we keep saying Airbnb and they're not the only website that we're looking at for this. But again, on our end, it was, we're looking for fire extinguishers, all the same requirements that the hotel, for example, has to. The hotel pays a lot of taxes, they employ people, they have to have these requirements, sprinkler systems and all of that. And we're not asking for residential sprinkler systems, in that form. But we do want the city to know that they're here, to be registered with us, the building department and code department at least inspects it initially, the fire department at least inspects those initially. That's really what we're looking for. It's just the safety of the businesses, that are operating. These businesses should have to comply with all the regulations that all the other businesses do. And again, I think you have to decide where. You have all kinds of zoning within the city, residential, a lot of these pop up in R1s. I don't know how popular that would be, in a neighborhood. I don't know how many residents would be okay if this was down the street in a multifamily district, or if this was right next door in an R1. So I think your zoning is a
Well,
little
I'm
bit
guessing
of a...
hers is in an R1, is that correct?
Yes.
We've talked to all of our neighbors, they know what we have. We wanted to make sure that we have their support, or at least their understanding. And we get along fabulously. We love our neighbors. We have a great street that we live on.
And what if you didn't? What if there was either one or a group of neighbors that were not on board with that?
Well, I guess I would wonder what exactly their concerns were. We've never had guests who have gotten crazy out of control. Airbnb and VRBO have a rating system where when a guest leaves my home, I give them a rating and some feedback. So I don't accept people that have bad feedback, or I don't accept guests where other hosts have said they partied at my house, or they did this, or they did that. So there's a little bit of a layer of protection there from things getting out of hand. We've never, and it's been like a year and a half, we've never had an issue with guests. So I don't know what I would do. I'm just very fortunate that I didn't have to face that.
Well, and it certainly sounds like you're a very good host and want to make sure that your neighborhood is on board. But I guess I can envision where there would be hosts that may not have those concerns for their neighbors, or even be particular as to who is renting. Cash is cash.
Exactly.
And, how do you...
Without regulation, I think you leave it open to abuse by, there's a lot of great people that are doing it, honestly, and I support them. However, there are people out there that would take advantage of that. There's stories throughout the country of landlords evicting apartment tenants so that they can lease out as Airbnbs. Just stuff like that across the board. A lot of it in larger cities where these are really, hundreds of them all over the place.
Yes, Paul?
Something that comes to mind, over the years, we've had places, people in R1, R2, R3, doesn't matter, residential zoning, and they added on to their homes, or whatever they said, like a grandmother's residence or something like that, but then after a while, then they started renting. And we had neighbors complain about them, and we put a stop to them. So I think what you're gonna have to do is look at this. Are we going to allow somebody to have short-term rentals and people moving in and out all week, and then you won't allow somebody to rent out a small apartment in a house on a permanent basis? That doesn't exactly make sense to me if you're doing it in residential areas. It is a business, and we have business zoning, so, and we have, like in the past, acted to stop that. So I think you need to look at the rules. If I was in a neighborhood that allowed Airbnbs or any of those businesses, short-term rentals, and then wouldn't allow me to rent my part of the house out on a permanent basis, that'd be a problem.
Are there any other questions? Thank you, Mike.
Well,
I guess what I would suggest at this point is that if there is enough sentiment to continue to explore this type of accommodation in the city, then perhaps we can even have another committee meeting. I don't know exactly when that would be, maybe in a couple of weeks or so. I know we've got budget issues and so forth that are going to take precedent. But certainly something that we don't want to put by the wayside, because I think it's something that we have to deal with in one fashion or another, either that we're going to regulate them and permit them, or we're going to not permit them at all. So would there be any objection to continuing to discuss this issue moving forward? Seeing no objection, maybe, Andrea, if you wouldn't mind checking into more of the bed tax option to see how exactly that could be collected from the Airbnb should we permit them within the city. Also, maybe thinking about going forward whether we want to restrict the areas that they're permitted, such as Paul was indicating, whether we want them in an R1 or only in those that would be multifamily developments as well. So I think that's all for the committee meeting. If anyone has any other comments, perhaps Andrea could get back to us with her findings, and then we can, after that point, schedule another committee meeting to discuss further. Okay, thank you.